Most people's understanding of whole life insurance is based off of someone else's misunderstanding. Coming from a place believing that whole life was bad in my own personal life and Nate's as well for a long time, I can say with certainty that that is unequivocally true almost all the time, because if you understand whole life, you don't have a negative opinion of it.
You gotta think like a banker. In order to start wrapping your mind around this, you've got to think like a banker. You've got to understand how banks make money. Banks make money, simply put, through the principle of leverage. And the spread between what they would pay out on interest versus what they charge on interest is them controlling the environment to where they always win.
Infinite banking is a concept linked to how you can take over the banking function in your life, which is the name of the book, Becoming Your Own Banker. The most simplistic way to do that and do it efficiently and soundly and safely is by using the product of whole life insurance with a mutual company that's been paying dividends for 100 plus years consecutively. Whole life insurance has been around for hundreds of years. It's not magic. It does not need to be sensationalized. It is just truth. Once you know what to do, once you know what the problem is, you'll know what to do, as Nelson said.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Legends podcast with your hosts, Nate, Brandon, and Brock. Remember, our insights are not direct financial advice, so consult with your financial team before making any decisions based on the topics discussed in this show.
Welcome back to Cash Flow Legends. Nate and I are so humbled and honored that we are getting to do this part of walking through Becoming Your Own Banker. And the book that Nelson Nash wrote, this is the 5th edition from 2000. It's the last edition he wrote. We just got back from the think tank and we got to hear several people discuss the different editions.
Looks like this right here.
Yep. It can be found on our websites. We highly recommend. We actually encourage all of our members that go through our process to read Becoming Your Own Banker. There's a really beneficial way to read it. Go ahead, Nate.
Well, let me just say it can be found on our company website, unlimitedlifeconcepts.com. We'll probably end up adding it to our Cash Flow Legends website as well.
Nelson's book, Becoming Your Own Banker, is a 92-page book. It is the foundation of everything that we teach and believe related to whole life insurance and the infinite banking concept. And if you're just coming to our podcast and this is the first one you've ever listened to, and you hear the word whole life, I'm going to say something that Nelson said often because it's true, because Nate and I have lived it. Most people's understanding of whole life insurance is based off of someone else's misunderstanding. Coming from a place believing that whole life was bad in my own personal life and Nate's as well for a long time, I can say with certainty that that is unequivocally true almost all the time, because if you understand whole life, you don't have a negative opinion of it. So, Nate, I'm reminded of something Ryan Griggs said at the think tank that I absolutely loved. He said, yeah, I'm in a profession where I love trying to teach people how whole life is good when 99% of the world thinks it's bad. That's how much I believe in it.
You know what? I've said this before, like, we didn't choose this life. This life chose us.
Yep. It's true.
You know, it wasn't something that we signed up for necessarily, that we decided that we were going to try to fight against conventional wisdom at every turn. But, you know, it is definitely what we believe we were created to do. Outside of just our personal relationship with the Lord and leading our families, we know that we were created to share this message.
So we're going to talk about page 12 and 13. Nate and I cannot recommend enough, and Brock as well, the value of reading Becoming Your Own Banker, getting a hard copy in your hand, and referencing it often. We were actually challenged, having read this book 7+ years ago, by one of our dear mentors, Mike Everett, to reread it often as people who live this and practices. You see, Nate and I and Brock are not just teaching you something that we think could help you. We're living something that we want to share with you because we know it has helped everybody that has implemented it. And that sounds bold, but it's true. So let's really tie into a lot about Nelson, because Nelson's the one who chose to write this, and how this all got started. So how did the infinite banking concept get started? Let's first start with this. Infinite banking is a concept linked to how you can take over the banking function in your life, which is the name of the book, Becoming Your Own Banker. The most simplistic way to do that and do it efficiently and soundly and safely is by using the product of whole life insurance with a mutual company that's been paying dividends for 100 plus years consecutively. Whole life insurance has been around for hundreds of years. It's not magic. It does not need to be sensationalized. It is just truth. Once you know what to do, once you know what the problem is, you'll know what to do, as Nelson said. Nate, we just got back from the think tank. Tell the story that Jason Lowe shared with us about his woodshed moment, because I think that's public knowledge that's been shared before, so it's a very valuable thing.
Yeah, so Jason shared several years ago, in his early years of his business, he was at the think tank and he gave a talk, and it got the crowd on their feet. Everybody was fired up and excited. And he walked kind of backstage, and Nelson walked up to him and he said, good job. But he said, IBC does not need to be sensationalized. And there was more to that conversation, but Jason said that was a defining moment in his business, because it shifted everything that he was doing previously, where before he was focused on rates of return and dividends and all these different things that people get caught up in. And it's very simple in the grand scheme of things, because it's about controlling the banking function. And it's strange when you hear someone say this. And so if you don't know anything about IBC, it's going to sound weird, but infinite banking is not about rates of return. Mm-hmm. Nelson said that at the very beginning of the book. This is not about rates of return. So anybody who talks about IBC and they're using rates of return in the same conversation, they don't understand the concept of infinite banking.
Good stuff. So let's paint the picture for Nelson a little bit. If you don't have Becoming Your Own Banker in your hand, which you should as soon as possible. Page 12, Nelson talks about he was trained as a forester, and he graduated from the University of Georgia in 1952. Okay, so he already had a background in the fact that timber is a form of real estate, and timber requires long-range thinking. Now, when he graduated from Georgia, his words basically is that there are a lot of things about the timber world that now, today, in our journey of IBC, really pair well together, because it requires Nelson's number one principle, which is think long range. All right. So Nelson brings up this great point that real estate is brought up as this great idea to put your money in places, but you miss so many pieces if the market goes up or the market goes down. And that brings us back to where our wealth resides. So Nelson makes this statement: knowing how dividend-paying life insurance works is an essential ingredient to it all. Most people have a minimal understanding of the subject, including the home office personnel at life insurance companies. And it seems blunt, and we missed Nelson by a year, unfortunately. But we come from top stock because his guys and ladies that he poured into, we've had the blessing of being poured into by them. Mike Everett, Chris Bay from the Life Success and Legacy team, James Nethery and Ryan Griggs from Banking with Life podcast, and they have their own companies. Winnie Lau, Richard Canfield, Jason Lowe. I mean, the list really goes on and on. How privileged we have been to be around people who knew Nelson for 10, 20, 30 plus years and lived life with him. So most of Nelson's background and why he wrote Becoming Your Own Banker really were founded in the most challenging time of his life. Nate, you want to talk about that a little bit, about like what really occurred for Nelson and what brought him to this reality of figuring out what the problem was and then the solution?
Yeah, so Nelson said that he had developed a strong interest in the subject of real estate, studying a bunch of books. And he said if you read these books, the central message is not about real estate, it's more about the magic of leverage, the principle of leverage. And when I was reading that and thinking about that, it's kind of funny and ironic at the same time that Nelson Nash and Dave Ramsey have similar stories when it came to their pivotal moment in their lives. So Nelson found himself in a position where, because of the market turning against him, he became over leveraged in real estate. Dave Ramsey found himself in a place where, because the market turned against him, he became over leveraged in real estate. Now, the difference is Dave Ramsey said, leverage, I don't ever want to be a part of that again, and started teaching basically cash only. I mean, that was his thing. Nelson recognized the power of the principle of leverage and leaned into it and found a way to control the environment.
And Nate, let's touch on that, control the environment. Let's kind of paint the picture of what was going on in the late 70s and 80s. So it was a low interest rate environment for a long time. Now, as of this recording, we're in 2025. We are coming out of one of the lowest interest rate environments that we've had in a long time. And so Nelson is in real estate, a ton of it. But guess what happens to the interest rates? They start going up. And Nate, you know that I can speak from experience that real estate is all well and good till it isn't. Doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that you better have a lot of things in play to protect from what you aren't prepared for, and worst case scenarios, to be in a position to be able to ride those economic waves that occur that are man-made. They don't just happen. And this is the foundation. You'll hear us reference Austrian economics many times. We'll talk about it later as far as how Nelson's background in forestry and being a pilot and wind currents all connected. But also you'll hear the importance of understanding that rates of return are going to go up and down. This is not about rates of return. This is not about interest rates. This is about controlling the process of banking at the me and you level. So Nelson begins to experience where rates go accustomed. Now listen to this. This is important. 9.5% is kind of what he refers to. And then in a very short period of time, 81 and 82, the prime rate rose to 21.5%. And he said, add 1.5 on top of that, and he's got 23% interest on 500,000. That amounts to 67,500 in interest to pay per year that he was not expecting to pay. Now, if you've interacted with real estate before, I have experienced something very similar to this. Not that dramatic of a number, but very similar. Who goes into a real estate deal and goes, oh, I'm prepared to pay $67,000 more in interest than I thought I was going to the year before? Nobody. So this is where Nelson begins to start finding his words. When a number of bad things like this occur in a fairly rapid succession, it can increase the quality of your prayer life dramatically. I don't know if everybody's like me, but I tend to forget order of operation, and I go to the Lord when I'm in the biggest bind instead of staying with the Lord at all times. And that's what Nelson's referring to. The basic idea revealed in the infinite banking concept was born over a period of many, many months at 3 to 4 a.m. in the kneeling position, praying, Lord, please show me a way out of this financial nightmare that I have created for myself. The answer came back about like a baseball bat across the eyes. So, Nate, one thing that we are so honored and connected with Nelson on is that knowing Jesus as your Lord and Savior is more important than understanding how money works. And everybody we talk to, I picked Barry Dyke's brain. While we were at this most recent think tank, Barry Dyke wrote The Pirates of Manhattan, The Retirement Ruse, and a lot of other great research about what's really going on. And he knew Nelson well. Barry is, I think, 70 now. And I asked him, I said, is it true that Nelson would rather share his faith in Jesus with you than the power of IBC and whole life insurance? And he said, absolutely, no question about it. So, Nate, I feel it's a privilege for us and an honor that we have this found us, and we get to live out that just like Nelson did to the best of our ability. Because if you don't have the main thing figured out, money don't matter. So I want to ask everybody a question real quick. How many times in your life already, if at all, have you experienced what feels like this financial hamster wheel where you can never get ahead, where you always feel like, man, I make a few steps forward and then 5 steps back. I make 2 or 3 forward and then 10 steps back. This is what Nelson was experiencing. It. You don't even have to think about it being real estate if you know nothing about real estate, Nate. This could be in your daily personal financial system. So bring it to the me and you level, Nate, and how Nelson wrote this book for what he calls the average Joe and why that's so important.
One thing that that Nelson wrote on page 13 in this book was hardship often helps us to see things to which we are normally blind. And Nelson knew that this concept was going to be difficult for people to understand if it was written in technical terms. Mm-hmm. And so he wrote it for the layperson, the person who doesn't understand whole life insurance. And that's why there's a lot of stories and analogies that are in the book, is because he knew the learning curve for him was through the fire. Well, not everybody has the ability to go through the fire the way he did. And so he did the best that he could possibly do to articulate the concept and the process and break it down in simple terms where people could understand. And even on page 12, he references one of the key concepts in this whole process. He said, you are always dealing with borrowed money. You either borrow money and pay interest, or you use your own money and you give up the interest that you could have earned. That's a simple, the cash versus finance illustration that we talk about so often and use so often. The everyday person can look at that illustration and go, that makes sense. I don't understand where it's going yet, but what you just showed me right there in that moment makes sense. And I want to learn more. I want to lean into this.
Yeah, Nate, you just reminded me of something that even in my own journey, it probably took 3+ years after beginning to implement this concept and this mindset to go, oh, this is what Nelson meant. So Nelson makes a statement later in the book, we'll definitely touch on it, that it's not the rate, but the volume. And a simple way to think about that is that if I have a 30-year mortgage and I've got a great rate of 3, 4, 5%, the volume of interest that I pay over the 30 years is pure interest going to the mortgage company, which often means in America that you paid for the house twice or pretty close. $300,000 house over 30 years costs you $600,000. I'm not making this up. I challenge you to go look at your amortization schedule right now. So does it matter if you have a 2.5% rate if you're going to give somebody $300,000 of interest? And what Nelson is trying to get us to understand is that the banking process, that's the banking process, will go on till the day we die. The real question is, like he figured out, like he says, the answer came back like a baseball bat across the eyes. He said his words, you are standing in the midst of everything it takes to get out, but you don't see it because you look at things like everyone else. Let's pause in that for a second. Because you look at things like everyone else. Nate, we have been so privileged to be in rooms all by the blessing of the Lord to realize that it's not what you know. It's what you think you know that just ain't so, and how much you're willing to unlearn. And so the answer is almost always there when we're really willing to unlearn what we thought was true that's keeping us chained to something that's not good for us. And that's relevant in any walk of life, isn't it, Nate? Doesn't matter what we're talking about.
For sure. And that, the key, and you'll hear this often, is you got to think like a banker. In order to start wrapping your mind around this, you've got to think like a banker. You've got to understand how banks make money. Banks make money, simply put, through the principle of leverage. And the spread between what they would pay out on interest versus what they charge on interest is them controlling the environment to where they always win in most cases. Now, some banks over the years, they get over leveraged in their dealings and they end up going under. But a bank makes money through the process and principle of leverage, and understanding that you can properly apply the principle of leverage in your life through this instrument is really powerful. You can start acting like a bank.
So these pages talk about where the infinite banking concept was born. And what I love about it is it was born out of you and me life problems that the common person is going to have. How do we know that? Because 80% of people don't get to retirement and experience this way they thought they were going to. How do we know that? Because most people are living with less than $1,000 in a bank to handle an emergency. How do we know that? Because all of the numbers that we look at in the world show that a large percentage of the population of people who live in America are on a financial treadmill or hamster wheel, and they don't know how to get off of it. Yet they step back on it every day. And so what Nelson says is, here is a better way to do things. The solution was right in front of me the whole time. And the cool thing about Nelson is that he already had some whole life insurance starting back, I think, when he was a 13 or 14-year-old, Nate, if I remember right.
Yep.
His dad bought.
Yeah, he said if I had not been accustomed to paying very large premiums, it is doubtful that I would have seen the message.
Yep. Let's lean into that for a minute. If I had not been accustomed to paying very large premiums, as we go through this book journey of becoming your own banker, you're going to hear Nelson's 5 key principles. 1 is think long range. 2 is don't be afraid to capitalize. We'll stop right there. Don't be afraid to capitalize. What Nelson is saying is our money's got to go somewhere. It's going to benefit somebody else, or it's going to benefit me. It's going to benefit somebody else's banking function, or it's going to benefit my banking function. When he says don't be afraid to capitalize with think long range, what he's saying is that I'm going to send money somewhere all my life. My kids are going to send money somewhere. My grandkids are going to send money somewhere. The real question is how much of those dollars are going to be able to be reused to benefit the things and the people and the mindsets and the purposes that matter to me the most first. And when we realize that, Nate, what you really get into is this reality of, oh, this is real uncomfortable. This is a little nerve-wracking. This might even be a little scary because I may have to go against the grain of what the world says. But is the world helping you get to where you know you want to go? And the truth is, from our experiences, is hardly ever does somebody say, yep, I know without a shadow of a doubt that what I'm doing is letting me live on purpose with my dollars, fueling that to bring so much value to this world that I can't wait to get up the next day.
On that note, let's use Nelson's words at the end of page 13 as a call to action. So he says, maybe you have found yourself in such a financial prison, or maybe you want to develop a system that will keep you out. Maybe yours is smaller or greater. Whatever the principles are the same and they will, whatever the principles are the same and they will serve you well. It requires understanding and it requires discipline to implement the idea, but it can change your life dramatically, even beyond your fondest dreams. So if you're listening to this right now and you're wondering, how could this help me? Lean into that.
The thing that Nate just said that's so important is also the thing that Nelson said in the title of the book, becoming your own banker. And there's one of my favorite sentences in the whole book, Nate, is on page 63. I know it, but I'm going to read it. This is an exercise in imagination, reason, logic, and prophecy. It is an exercise, meaning there is action being taken. Meaning if you want somebody to tell you what to do, this isn't for you. This is a part of your growth and process and you taking action. And as Nate and I say often, what's the worst thing that could happen if you commit to learning and going through this process of how could it be implemented and benefit your life? You learn something new. That's it. And the cost of a book, $25. If we're not willing to invest $25 on ourselves, which I can spend at Starbucks in about one drive-through, then we may not really be ready to grow yet. And Nelson brings that up over and over and over again, that this is about how we think. So that's a great call to action, Nate, is just lean into it. Commit time to re-become your own banker. If we feel like a good fit for you, to get on our schedule, to ask us questions. If you buy the book from our website, we built this way on purpose. You're going to also get what we call our course, which is just sharing Nate and I's experiences with why we went from being a middle school principal, and Nate was a pastor at that time, to being able to do this full time and teaching this and the impact it's had on our life. So you can have some personalized connection. And was it Jason Lowe that said, Nate, that all interaction on social media should be geared towards a conversation in this world of becoming your own banker and teaching it? That's exactly how we built our process. We want you to feel comfortable enough to want to get on a phone call or a computer screen meeting or an in-person meeting. But it all starts with how you think. So if you found yourself in some type of financial prison, or even if you found yourself in, could it be more efficient than what I'm already doing? What's the cost of investing in yourself and seeing if you can learn something new? A little time, a little energy, maybe $25 for a book. So next week, or the next infinite banking conversation we have, will be about imagination. That's just one page, but it's something that's so lost and missed, Nate, in almost all financial conversations, that we love drawing out of people. Hey, if money wasn't an object, if money wasn't something that you were chained to, what would you be doing? And the crazy thing is, Nate, is most of us don't think with that much imagination as it relates to money, because we're just trying to make it to the next day. So we hope this is a valuable time to share Nelson's message and brings value to you. And remember, it's all about how you think and how you invest in yourself. And we hope this allows you to do that in a way that keeps you moving in a direction that you're excited about. Till the next time, we hope you have a great week, and we do not take lightly that you spend time with us to listen. And we hope we bring value to you on a daily basis.